Hello and welcome to Blue Tinted Glasses. This is YouTube's #1 Leicester City Football Club fan channel and voice of the fans. And today it's time for a match preview. It's Leicester City against Crystal Palace. Absolutely huge game. And I'm joined by our new regular host for this show. It's Luke from LCFC Down Under. How are you doing today, Luke?
I'm good, thanks, mate. Hoping to not get a points deduction, but other than that, mate, it's all good.
Good. Well, we're going to move on to this today. And please do leave your comments and feedback down below. Also, do like the video if you think this is good, because this is some of the most impressive work we've seen on the channel. I think Luke is clearly angling for a move here in this January transfer window. And I've got a feeling, based on what he's about to present, he might well get it. So, well, any further ado, Luke, let's talk about Leicester City against Crystal Palace.
Here we go. So Crystal Palace recent form, as you just alluded to earlier, they have the best form in the bottom half of the table. They have the players, they have the rotation still to make, whereas we don't. And it's very, very frightening to see with a points deduction looming. But hey, we've just had a really good win. Granted, it was against a championship opposition in Queen's Park Rangers, but it's still nonetheless something for confidence for the boys to move on with. Moving on. Won't go into this too much, mate, but I wasn't sure if I was going to go too much into the FA Cup games, but I thought for what it's worth, why not? You can see here they've had plenty of shots. All due respect, it is Stockport. Obviously, a heap of possession. Eze for the late winner. Probably a frustrating game if you're a Crystal Palace fan, to be honest with you, but nonetheless, they got the win and they move on just like we do.
They're finished. They only scored 1 goal against League One opposition. We scored 6 against a championship team. Now, obviously, it depends how deep a block they played Stockport.
As you can see, the recent 11 here, a little bit to get into. We'll talk about Chalobah later because there is some interesting news regarding him. But here you have Chris Richards, who is basically the third option for Chalobah's not available. Guehi, they've kind of gone somewhat strong. Very interesting. Shadi Riyad, not too familiar with, but by all accounts, a decent Moroccan. And what's interesting here is that you pointed out earlier is that usually they utilize Kamara, who is quite a big center attacking forward, but he's got no goals or assists this season. But he is a big presence, and he is somewhat starting to hit form with patch and starts here and coming off here and there. What are your thoughts on Kamara being swapped around into this central position here?
Well, that I find super interesting. I actually don't know if they've been doing it in all of their games, but yeah, I saw that the Crystal Palace fans have been quite upset with his signing. They obviously sold Michael Olise to Bayern Munich in the summer, and those were big boots to fill, right? He's a top player, but he's just sort of not doing the business. So they've also signed Ismaila Sarr. I think they might have signed him 12 months ago, actually, in the January transfer window. And it's interesting that I was expecting him to be like the rotation option with Daniel Munoz, right? Because he's like traditionally been a kind of right-sided player, good engine on him. But here you can see the way that they play, they sort of have 2 10s. And so they put Ismaila Sarr as the 10. And that's normally where Kamada would play. And he's playing in this position. I've noticed that looking at their squad there's no Adam Wharton or Kouyaté. So perhaps I'm guessing that maybe because of injuries, he's been asked to play there. But that is interesting. And if they're going to go this way against us, I mean, that is something we could maybe exploit. The other thing that stands out to me here as well is you've got Nathaniel Klein here. Now, when he played against us earlier in the season, he actually played here as a right centre-back. I've also seen him sometimes play as this right wing-back. So him being used as their left wing-back, well, he's not naturally left-footed. I think he can use his left foot. But again, that's quite interesting. I mean, look, at this point in the season, what tends to happen is that squads do start to get stretched. And to be fair, this is a cup game. So as you said, they've gone strong, but this clearly isn't like their strongest 11, right? I think they would probably have Mateta instead of Nketiah. You might also remember that when we played them earlier in the season, after we went 2-1 up, they put Mateta and Nketiah on together, and they actually put 2 strikers on to try and force the equaliser, which they, of course, got. So a lot of interesting things. Of course, you mentioned they've got a Moroccan player themselves. I think they signed Shadi Riyad from Barcelona, would you believe? Or maybe it was Betis. So he's pretty highly rated. And yeah, some things about this team do make me jealous. Just, I mean, their centre-back options, if you look at how many people they've got on the bench, especially, kind of frightening. Just shows you the quality of squads in the Premier League.
Very good. And unfortunately, I don't think we really want to talk about this, to be honest. Granted, in there we have Liverpool and Man City, but let's just hope that we're turning the page of a new book that's going to have some more success and some points, because this game is more than a 6-pointer to me, man. I don't know how you feel, but it's getting a little bit squeaky bum time, isn't it, Anil?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just crazy because if you think about this, if you look at the last 5 games, that meant that 5 games ago we were above Crystal Palace, and it just goes to show you what 5 L's in a row will do to your league position. So yeah, I think if we have 6 in a row, I mean, it'll be looking really bad. You never know. We only need to finish 17th to stay up, but we're already 2 points off safety. We've got to start making something happen and make it happen quick.
Here's our statistics for QPR. 10 shots versus 8. There was a period in that game where we feel aware of the first half where we didn't look that great, to be honest with you, after scoring. But what matters is that we finished that game strong and everyone got involved and confidence is around for everyone, which is really good to see, that the amount of scorers and individual efforts and the absolute screamer from Wout Faes, who may be going for all we know, but we'll talk about that another time. Possession 54%. That's what you would expect. Granted, even though QPR do play that, we talked about Martin Cifuentes, excuse me if I pronounced that wrong, in that style of football. But I just think that the depth that we had compared to them was just too much.
Yeah, I hope we're as clinical as that against Palace. 6 shots on target and scored 6 goals. You're not often going to see that. That's deadly. That's the Van Nistelrooy effect, perhaps.
That is the Van Nistelrooy effect. Now, I will talk about the 11 that I expect to see later, but I nearly went for no changes. But we do hear that, spoiler, that Yannick Vestergaard is back available. But what was most surprising here is how strong we went. Some people might be, disappointed not to see Will Alves or Golding play in the FA Cup. But as we alluded to in the post-match and the watch-along of BTG, that essentially that confidence was everything. And we needed to get that, settled 11 under Ruud van Nistelrooy, who has not had yet a transfer window signing so far, or a preseason. So in my opinion, he's kind of learning tools on the job, and that would explain why. And unfortunately, Danny Ward got played a second time. But we won't talk about that game anymore. But moving on, this is where we're going to get into the exciting things. Oliver Glasner, what kind of managerial style? Oliver Glasner likes to employ high pressing. Glasner teams press high up the pitch, closing down spaces in the middle. Counter-attacking. Glasner's teams counteract quickly, looking for space between the lines to receive the ball. And squeezing the pitch. Glasner teams push up the pitch when defending, forcing the opponent away from the goal. And flexible systems, whereas Glasner's teams use a variety of systems, including a 3-4-2-1, 3-2-5, and most commonly a 3-4-3. And lastly, numerical superiorities. Crystal Palace often employed extra player in attack, using their box midfield to create a numerical superiority. They basically have their 2 10s, their box midfield, and as well as their left and right wing back getting involved upside the pitch. So I'll talk about that more later when we go through these examples right here.
Yeah, it's funny. He's been in the job about a year now. Had a very strong start, not so good this season, but of course he did win the Europa League with Frankfurt, and that's why I think him and Kieran McKenna, just the 2 managers that have survived so far in the bottom sort of 5 or 6 teams in the table in terms of keeping their job.
Absolutely. So here we go, the managerial tactics analysis of Oliver Glasner. Right, now this is one that we are somewhat quite familiar with to a certain extent, with the low build-up, where the keeper will push up alongside, in between, or right behind the 2 centre-backs, i.e. what we've seen before under Manson. And then you have your 2 centre-backs here, you have your left and right wing-back, as well as your double pivot ready to receive the ball. So you can expect to see the goalkeeper or the centre-back distributing the ball back to the double pivot option, who would then dish it out wide, and then we progress from there to the low build-up. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, it's very familiar. We do exactly the same thing. Sometimes our keeper might be on this side and the centre back this side, because normally Vestergaard would stand here. The only thing I would say is these are the 2 centre backs as well who push wide. And you can see here that their wing backs actually join the attack very early on in their build up. So they're quite aggressive from the off. I think that the key thing for me in Glasner's teams, and it's also similar to Ruben Amorim, is that their width is coming from these wing back players who have to have like real engines on them, which can be both good and bad. And I think that maybe explains a little bit with Glasner's system why maybe they're not that consistent, because they can be explosive. And we'll come to that in a moment. But yeah, this is very, very familiar. Many teams in the Premier League do that kind of thing.
High backline's another one. Why don't you take me through this one, man? What your thoughts are going from the low build to low press to this high backline here?
Yeah, so this is, again, something that's pretty familiar. You actually see that Ruud's trying to sort of do this with Leicester, but I think the big difference with Palace, and, I think the Palace fans are upset, but in the summer, they sold Joachim Andersen back to Fulham and they signed some other centre-halves. Obviously, you talked about Chadi Riyad. They got Maxence Lacroix. They've also got Mark Guehi. Chris Richards was playing in the Cup game. The one thing that all of these centre-backs have in common is they're pretty quick. I wouldn't say they're like Kyle Walker or Kusanov, who Man City are about to sign rapid, or Mickey van der Ven. He's probably the fastest centre-back in the league, right? But they're all pretty quick. And that reason he did that is so they could play a high back line. Although it is interesting that defensively they've struggled. So as you mentioned with his analysis, is they want to squeeze up the pitch, which means you can compress the play into the other opposition half. It means that the wing backs that we're talking about, they don't have to do so much defensive work, right? They can focus on attacking, which is where they want to be. But it also means that if there's a transition, because you've got 3 fast centre backs, it's not completely game over. You've got a chance to maybe catch something on the break if that happens. But yeah, the idea, as you can see here, is if it's all going according to plan, everyone pushes up into the opposition half and make the opponents defend, and you don't even have to. Your keeper can just be sitting at the back, reading the paper, having a lovely time of it because the ball's nowhere near there. That's the best way of defending, is to attack.
And would you say that for this to work most effectively, that you would definitely need your back three to stretch the pitch as far as possible? Therefore, if there is going to be any form of transition, the space gets picked up by the left and right wing back.
Yeah, that's definitely a point. I think, obviously playing a high back line is obviously just a risk reward thing. Like Villa are the same. It's like when it works, you can really force the opposition back, and it feels like quite, what's the word for it? Like, you're constrictive, right? Like it's in MMA, like you're in a chokehold or something. You just can't get out. But at the same time, the issue is that like there's always the ball over the top, and you can get caught on pace as well. So it's understandable why teams do it, because, as I say, it means you have like so many more options and you can control the opposition in their half. But it is interesting that, like, there's also got the possibility of it going wrong, and you can see, is it down to the personnel or the team instructions? That's for others, I think, to decide.
Finding the pocket. So here you go. You can see them building up. This is quite interesting. So why don't you take me through this, mate? Because I think it's very eerily similar to what we saw under Enzo Maresca last season with Leicester.
Well, it's funny, because this is Crystal Palace, but actually, like this particular player, if this was one player in our team, it would be Bilal El Khanous, who's really, really good at doing that. In fact, look at his positions that he takes up for Leicester. He's always sort of trying to do it. So what does it mean, the pocket? So here they're playing against Fulham Palace, and you can see that Fulham are defending in your bog standard 4 at the back, 4 midfielders, 2 up front, so a 4-4-2. So when you're in a 4-4-2, 4-4-2 gives you like good coverage. You can see everyone's equally sort of spaced out. No matter where the ball is, there's always going to be some players around. So what the pocket is, and here you can see, I think this is actually from last season, and this is Elise, or actually it might be Mateta, is he's trying to stand in a position where you can see no one player is picking him up. So these guys are going to be defending in the zone. They're not doing man-to-man marking. So by standing in the pocket, it means that you are able to make that free pass, and you're trying to make the 4-4-2 work against the opposition by finding the spaces in between, shift them around the block. So you need to have intelligent players that are good at understanding where those spaces are and where to stand and how to receive the ball. And so Palace, the way that they play is they have 2 players that operate like this. So they'll have one player in this number 10 position, and then they'll have another player who is also trying to sort of stand in the pockets there as well, and one centre half. And you're looking to find these players who operate in between the lines. And as I'm sure we'll come on to in a moment, Crystal Palace's best player is someone that operates in the half spaces and finding the pockets. And if they can find that particular player, he's particularly deadly. And yes, Leicester did that. Now, last season, we tried to do that with both Dewsbury Hall, and it would normally be Ndidi. This season, we tend to do it more with Bilal El Khanous. But of course, Buonanotte or Ayew, if they will also try and sort of find those spaces when the fullback, who here you can say in Crystal Palace's case is Daniel Munoz. In our case, it would be James Justin, pushes up to support. So sort of similar idea that many teams try to do. It's just how you arrive in this shape in the final third. And Palace do it through their 3-4-3 shape.
Numerical advantages. So I think a lot of this has to do with they have the box midfield with Eze and whoever else plays on the other side, dropping in where you have the 2 10s as well as the box midfield behind it. And then you have the options for obviously the both left and right wing back getting involved in play, depending on where the side the ball is on the pitch, which is very, 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 very dangerous. Obviously, there is vulnerabilities to that, weaknesses in transition, but if they're able to control the ball and the back three is organized as well as the keeper behind them, it can be a very dangerous style. What are your thoughts on this? And when it is used effectively, we've seen a lot in the Premier League now that everyone is going for this essentially.
Yeah, and this is where Palace were at their best, especially last season. So here you've got the opportunity that this is Wharton playing across, and there's potentially three people he could find there. Mateta, you've got Eze attacking the half space, so that was the key man we were talking about. And in this case, you've got Tyrek Mitchell. So what's great about this is if you played across, if like the first or second player misses it, you've still got a third player that could get to it. Maximizes the opportunity. You can see in this case, like Wolves have got 4 people back, Palace have got 4 here alone. So is going to get them a high quality opportunity. And yeah, this is ideal. If there's 2 versus 1, this would often be James Justin for us earlier in the season. And it's actually not the defender's fault, because what do you do in this case? Here he's going to go to Eze. Kind of makes sense. I mean, he's a danger man, but that means Mitchell's going to be completely free. So that's what the modern game is all about. You're trying to generate these advantages. Now, the way that it kind of works is for you to generate that advantage here, it means you're going to have a disadvantage somewhere else on the pitch. So that's what modern football is all about. It's like, how do you manage your disadvantages while creating these advantages? And how do you take advantage of those advantages when you generate them?
Final third analysis. This is where it gets interesting as well. Attacking the half space. So this is something that we are very familiar with, particularly last season with Ndidi as that 8 on the left-hand side there, for the example. And then you would have Fatau pushing on the right-hand side. We'd see them link between each other very well last season. And very similar to that example we just used of Eze, with providing 2 options where the defender does not know who to man. And then therefore, when they're playing the 1-2s to each other, you work yourself into that half space. Therefore, getting yourself ready to either put it into the box, or if you're Fatawi, cutting it into your left foot and putting it in the back of the net, hopefully. Why don't you talk about what your thoughts are on this, mate?
Yeah, you've pretty much explained it. That's how it works. We see us try to do it as well. Again, look, you see why does this so effective is because here you've got Man United defending, and this was last season under Ten Hag, so in a 4-4-2. So there you know that the gaps are going to be in between these players. So you're trying to make the runs and find the pass in there. And, you know, as we'll probably show in another example here, is with this player threatening this run here, this player could actually cut inside instead. I think what's interesting here is this is their wing back, and you've got the 10 that's drifted that wide, so they can interchange. And you actually see this sort of play under Ruud van Nistelrooy as well. So most of the time, James Justin will be here, but sometimes you'll see James Justin here, and it might be Ayew or Buonanotte that drifts out here instead. And again, it's all to try and generate these sort of spaces so that you can attack and get in behind teams and open them up.
Overlaps for opportunity. So this is where, when they're compressing in of the 2 10s and they're drifted in the middle and they're passing between one another, and let's say that the other team is to drop deep into, even not really park the bus so deep, but be compact and defensively resolute, then you would need that numerical advantage we discussed earlier, and that can therefore come from the overlaps for opportunity, depending where the ball is, and then provide that extra option to then put a ball into the back of the box for one of the players to hopefully put a header in, or direct a deflection for an opportunity. Anything else you want to add to that, mate, with your strategic geniusness?
No, just that it ties into what we said before. So here you can see that here you got Michael Elise from last season. So he could go down the line, but because he decides to cut in, it means that Daniel Munoz now can attack down this side instead. Or here you can see, look, he's on his bike and he's properly attacking to try and get there. And so if you're the defender in either of these situations, it's, you know, what do you do? Who do you go to? And it's just creating you many, many different, problems. In fact, here we can see this bottom one against West Ham. It's not only they're attacking with DC, but look how many other players are streaming forward to try and join the attack. So it's causing chaos, and these transitional moments, you mentioned it right at the top of the show with Glasner. When we say counter-attack, that's what he's sort of trying to do. It's like an offensive counter-attack. Is when they make a mistake, you go forward with the 5 players, you try and create these overloads to stretch them, and that's going to generate your high-quality opportunity.
Defensive tactics analysis, the good way here there. Right, low press. Now, this is what we were talking about earlier, and this is interesting. So, like, you got here almost you got 5-2-3 here, and my prediction is here you've basically got the back 3 centre backs that are here ready to defend, be defensively resolute. You've got both wing backs here ready as well in the half. You could call it the half space, although there is acres of space, and you did point that out. So if you look on the bottom left hand here, compared to, if you look at basically the right winger, that's basically the second 10, as well as the right wing back, between there is acres of space. But unfortunately here you can see there's no one there creating a space for the option. Although I will say, this is, look, if they're to press and they would have in possession of the ball, you could argue that, you've got your centre backs, you've got the box midfield, and then you can work your way through that way, as well as your wing backs that can provide the option. So you can really pull them apart. But it is quite an interesting shape, to be honest with you, because you've got 3 centre backs, a left and right wing back, and then you've got your double pivot, and then you've got your 2 10s and your striker. So a little bit different to a lot of other teams. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that?
This is actually something I think is very interesting, just because 99% of teams in the Premier League defend in a 4-4-2. So there's only 2 teams right now in the Premier League that are playing this 3-4-3 formation. Oliver Glasner, and you've got Ruben Amorim, who's come from Sporting and is trying to get Man United to play that way. Now, I saw the cup game between Man United and Arsenal, and I think at times Man United were actually defending in the 4-4-2, but I've got a feeling they might have done that because they had a man sent off. So that's something to keep an eye on. So why is this interesting? So as you mentioned, right, in this sort of thing, there's pros and cons. One pro is that you've got 5 men at the back here, which, means there's even fewer gaps to exploit in the half spaces, right? But the disadvantage, as you can see, there's a massive gap here and there's a massive gap here. And, if you're someone like Bilal El Khanous, you're going to be licking your lips at being able to operate with that much space around you because you're going to have lots of time on the ball. So the reason that they do that is because they've got these wing backs. These wing backs are going to be going up and down the pitch all day long. So there's a lot of work for them to do. But for example, what they could do is that, this fullback here, or wing back, could tuck in here. You could have this as a back 4, and then one of these players could drop back and you could create a 4-4-2 shape that way, right? And that's what some teams could do. But if you're going to operate that way, the problem is this is even more instructions to take on. There's more people that are changing their position during the match, and it can exploit it because, as the ball gets turned over, if you're supposed to be here and you're actually there, well, then that's where the problems arise. So we'll keep an eye out on it. But here's the thing. I saw this with Frankfurt. You got to remember that Frankfurt won the Europa League, but then they actually ended up sacking Glasner about 6 months later. And I think here's the thing of his system. I think he's a really good manager, and I think their system's exciting. But I think that naturally their system might have some structural flaws, right? And I think the flaw is that defensively they can be got at. And I think this is one of the reasons why. So hopefully we can exploit it. But I will say that earlier in the season, we went 2-0 up against them. That was probably the best 45 minutes we played against them. Ndidi especially was really getting on Adam Wharton that game and caused them a lot of problems. So let's see if we can do that again. Hopefully we can. There's something to learn from that game, I think.
Here's another example of the high backline. Why don't you talk us through this, mate?
Yeah, that we mentioned it before. It's just trying to push people up the pitch so that, if the ball gets turned over, you can keep playing their half. So pretty standard stuff.
Yeah. Squeezing the pitch. Okay, this is where it gets interesting again as well, because a lot of this comes from the numerical superiorities that they can generate. And I think for this to be effective, their build-up play has to be on point and their possession has to be on point as well. Otherwise, they leave too many gaps and spaces in between, in my opinion. But when it works, Anil, why don't you tell us why this can be so effective when it is utilized correctly?
Yeah, I mean, you're just trying to win the ball back as fast as possible so they can start their attack. So you can see here that after defending in their shape, Wolves have decided to move back to try and build from the ball. We can see this is very early in the game. So you're trying to squeeze them up, force them back, move your entire block forward so you can move together as a unit. And yeah, they're wanting to dictate the game. So you saw against Stockport, admittedly, that was League One opposition. But by having 75% possession, you can guess in your head what will happen. Palace will have squeezed the game entirely into their half, the Stockport half, and it means they can control the game. There's very little opportunities for the opposition to make something happen, and there's plenty of opportunities for you to score instead.
Bang on. Okay, so we've talked about the high press really already, to be honest with you, but essentially what it is you've got, if you're going to create those numerical superiorities and you're going to compress the ball up the pitch, as you just said, particularly the 2 10s dropping in as well to help, and the link backs creating space on the outside to fill in that void in between, and you can compress them up the pitch, and the back 3 slowly presses up as well. That just basically locks that end of the pitch. Obviously, we mentioned earlier that a ball over the top could be quite dangerous to that, and that could be something that could be exploited that we'll talk about later. But if worked correctly and you're keeping possession of the ball, this is how you will have that high press, and it will compress the other team up the other ends of the pitch. And that's when things start to get dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only other thing that's worth mentioning, Van Nistelrooy does something similar here as well. So you can see in this diagram that when they press the ball, they're trying to compact the game down one side of the pitch. So you can see they do actually have some out balls, right? You've maybe got an out ball to this 4, although the 10 here could pick them up. But their number 3 here, the left back, is actually completely free. But the thing is because you're forcing the play down this side of the pitch, like here, it doesn't matter if this guy's completely free. That's a very dangerous and difficult pass to be able to make to find it. So what the idea here, the concept is you're always using this touch line here as an additional defender, and you're really forcing them into that sort of side. and that's going to hopefully make them do a mistake, or it wins you a throw in, and then you're on the attack again. So that's where the high press can be effective. And normally the way that teams do is they'll try and press the ball for, let's say, 7 to 10 seconds, and then if they can't win the ball back, then they're going to retreat back to that low build shape that you saw there when they get into their 5-2-3 shape.
Defensive transitions. Brilliant. Central positioning. So this here is basically essentially if they're going to give the ball away here, you've got an absolute, like, they're going to get bombarded here as we've got 4 players ready to attack them. You've got someone ready to mop the ball up if they were able to not complete that, someone to intercept the ball, essentially locking the ball again in this side of the pitch, creating panic and dissent, on the ball because it's inside their box. And then therefore, you could have an opportunity come from that very easily, or someone could lay it off for someone else to have an even easier tap in. What are your thoughts on this, mate?
Yeah, again, so this is interesting, right? I think this one's really good. You can see just the blur on this player, right? So you can see what the pressing trigger is as soon as you receive the ball here. So we mentioned before that they have 5 men at the back. And I think this could be one reason why they try to do that, because that's going to give them an additional man, especially deeper positionings. So the idea here is you want to turn the opposition's attack, actually make it work against them by winning a ball back quickly and springing a counter attack yourself. So that's why, even though, because you could say there is a risk here that, like, if you've got 4 people attacking this player, if he's good, there's a free pass into this guy who's completely free. But the idea is that because he's receiving the ball under pressure, he's going to panic and he's going to lose the ball. And if he does lose the ball, he's going to make his way through it. Ruud again tries to do something similar with Leicester, and it has, again, pros and cons. We saw it against actually Newcastle, sadly, that they'd often try and squeeze someone in, and if they got the ball over to Isak, it meant he was completely free and had the run on goal. But it's sort of part of the modern game, high risk, high reward. And Glasner prefers it because the reward is if you get the ball, then all of a sudden you've got all these attacking players streaming upfield, and it gives you more opportunity to score.
Defensive transitions. Okay, high tempo counter attack. We have kind of basically already alluded to this earlier. It's not really, you would say, a counter attack. It's been efficient, as you would say, in pushing in with 5 people and everyone moves together on transition. So essentially that it's not really a ball over the top and, hope it goes out to one of your wingers in terms of counter like we've seen before in the good old glory days of Leicester. It's more of like if the ball was turned over, bang, that's your pressing trigger. Everyone pushes, you attack in 5, everyone moves together as a unit, and that's basically where they're probably going to be the most threatening should they hit us out in transition, Crystal Palace.
Yeah, so if they snap the ball and win it back, like we showed in the previous example, they're going to get this kind of attacking opportunity. And here you can see that one of their wing backs is joining attack, and now you've got their deadly 10s. Both of them are in the pockets, they're free, and this looks like a pretty dangerous situation. I don't know what happened here, but if Palace made that 2-0, it wouldn't surprise me, based purely on looking at this screenshot.
Now, this is worth talking about, in my opinion. So Trevoh Chalobah. So Oliver Glasner claims Trevoh Chalobah wants to stay at Crystal Palace amid increasing rumours he'd be recalled to Chelsea in January. Having been exiled from the Chelsea first team last summer, Chalobah joined Palace on loan, where he has formed a great defensive partnership alongside Maxence Lacroix and Marc Guehi, himself a transfer target for Chelsea. Eagles manager Glasner hinted at the start of the month that he would like to sign the Englishman permanently, with the Blues expected to accept an offer of around $25 million. However, this is where it gets interesting. The reports now claim that Chelsea are considering recalling Chalobah from his loan after losing centre-backs Wesley Fofana and Benoit Badiashile. I'm sorry if I've massacred that to injury. Enzo Maresca has neither confirmed or denied that the West End Londoners are planning on doing this, but speculation intensified on Sunday after Palace's FA Cup win over Stockport County, because Oliver Glasner said he would be playing, and then he was admitted from the side. Now, the thing that gets interesting here is we know Enzo Maresca is well familiar with playing 3 centre-backs, and that's essentially what Trevoh Chalobah has been playing successfully at Crystal Palace all season. And I wouldn't really call him really a bomb squad player that's along with all the other people, because in my opinion, if you look at, Fofana here is obviously an absolute, they've spent 80 million. We all know that he's a very good player. So if there's anyone that could be recalled from, let's say, the bomb squad, this is Trevoh Chalobah, in my opinion, could slot straight in for Chelsea. Anything else you want to add to that, Anil?
He's a really good player. I can just say I signed him on my Football Manager, and he was in the team of the year. So I got a lot of love for Trevoh Chalobah. Yeah, that is interesting. That hopefully, I'm guessing that's why Chris Richards played. I think if anyone who's got defensive stability and they lose a player, it's a potential weakness, isn't it, that we could exploit. So let's see. It would be good, I think, if he's missing, because I think it's unsurprising the fact that he's come from Chelsea. He's probably the best all-rounder. I think it's interesting that Enzo didn't fancy him. He maybe doesn't think he's quite good enough on the ball, but I think his defensive side of his game is strong. And I think that the way that Palace play, I mean, as I mentioned with Joachim Andersen leaving, you need someone who's still got that resolute, no nonsense side about him. And I think that's also been unfair on his technical qualities. He has got it. He just maybe not so good at building. So let's keep an eye on that one.
Now, this key battle here is where, in my opinion, is going to be very interesting. And we'll talk about this. So I'll talk about this a bit more at 11, or we can really just talk about it now, to be honest with you. But JJ versus Eze. So that Eze, that's what worries me a lot, particularly if James Justin is going to be utilized as that auxiliary right winger. You're really going to depend on Samari to either back him up or whoever's on that right-hand side. Because in my opinion, if we're going to have, let's say, a build-up play, I'm expecting personally, whether it be Cody or Fast, to be, on the right-hand side with Yannick Vestergaard, spoiler alert again, in the middle as the builder, and then Victor Christensen on the left-hand side. So almost in possession, in the build-up, you can almost see a back three with James Justin pushing up the right-hand side of the pitch. Now, we know where it can work. We haven't really seen it too much yet other than the last game, and we know that it can be catastrophic on transition, but if James Justin has caught his pants down too far up the pitch as that auxiliary right winger. So in my opinion, we're depending on him and having good communication with Samari to talk with one another in and out of possession. You need Samari to help him out, or that right side centre back, in my opinion, when we are not defending that compact mid-block 4-4-2 shape. We know Eze is very dangerous. He's a very good player. Has got so far the, stats that he had last season where he was absolutely lighting it up, but he's still a very dangerous player, and he worries me the most probably on that team. What are your thoughts on this matchup, mate? Do you think it's the most crucial going into this game?
I think Eze is definitely the danger man. I think all this season is not just all on JJ, right? So if you think about it, Eze is actually going to be playing in the pocket. So that means at different stages of the game, it's going to be Justin to pick him up. Then at other times, it's going to be the right-sided centre back. So is that going to be Connor Cody or Wout Fast? At other times, as you say, it's going to be the CDM. And it might be Samari, it might be Winks. It depends on which one's playing on the left and which one's playing on the right in this particular game. As I say, I do think that when we played Palace last time round, actually, we did have Ndidi, but in that game, what was interesting is Ndidi actually played as one of the box crashers. He played as the 10 in that game, so he wasn't there even to pick him up. So yeah, like I say, the way that they play, because they have these players that drift around positions, it's not even just a case of it being one-on-one the entire game, although there for sure will be large moments where there is. So I think it's a team collective. And so, yeah, I guess what that means is will Ruud van Nistelrooy play Jordan Ayew or Facundo Buonanotte to give him some support? Because the other thing that complicates this as well is that on the same side, there's also going to be a left wing back as well. Is that going to be Tarek Mitchell, or is it going to be Klein, who we saw in this picture, or someone else? So just making sure that we can handle those particular overloads. But I would say it works both ways, which is why it's the key battle, which is that, yes, we have to watch out for their side, but Palace have to watch from our side too, because those players, if they get caught out on transition or they're positionally poor, then James Justin and Buonanotte or Ayew, they might be able to exploit the gaps that are left in behind, because if they only have one wing back, there's not so much coverage there. So that's where the game's going to be won and lost. And I feel that last time round, when we were on top, we actually exploited them and made those gaps look pretty bad. And then what happened inexplicably is that Steve Cooper decided with 20 minutes left to go to see out the game. He put Connor Cody on, defended as a 5, and we just completely threw initiative over to Palace. And that's how they got the equaliser. But I think, to be fair, Palace went 2 men up front. That was the tactical change that they made in that game. But I think up until that point, we actually looked like we were going to get a fairly convincing away win till, Steve Cooper, in my opinion, blundered it in that particular game. So we'll have to see if something happens there. But, things have changed since that was earlier on in the season.
This is the predicted lineup. Now, there is rumours of Wout Faes going, but in my opinion, if there is any rumours of him going, and after the game that he just had, which I thought he had a good game, this is the chance for him to, as arrogant as he is, put himself in the shop window. I also think because of the nature of this game it's going to be and everything that we've just discussed in regards to Crystal Palace's tactics, we are going to need a pacey centre back. I think Yannick Vestergaard's probably definitely going to be in if he's ready to go. And I think him and Cody, for the nature of this game, is just too slow. So we're going to need Wout Faes, because the reason why is, Anil, is if, like I just mentioned earlier, if we're going to be in possession in our build-up, going to be pushing towards more of a back three, right, and James Justin's going to be pushing up the pitch, and then you're going to have basically Buonanotte drifting in, and as well as El Canoes, we need someone to pick up that space with pace, in my opinion, of Eze there. So you've got Faes potentially, and then you have Samari as well, or James Justin, as you mentioned earlier, alternating. Because Eze likes to drift in the middle. What are your thoughts on this 11? But in my opinion, basically no changes other than Cody last week. You could make the argument for Jordan Ayew, although I do think that takes something away in terms of our build-up threat because of his pace. Although you could make the argument that he drops back and helps Justin. But to be honest with you, mate, there's been no clear time this season where I've been like, you know what, really, JJ was really helped out today and covered by Ayew. In fact, we've actually pointed out things where he's left him exposed. So in my opinion, that's a little bit of a myth. And I would much prefer Buonanotte. It would just look so much more threatening. I know that he can leave JJ exposed, but in my opinion, the trade-off between him and Ayew, there's not that much difference in the defensive cover for JJ, in my opinion. The biggest chance and hope that we're going to get, if we're going to keep playing that way, would be with the inclusion of Wilfred and Ndidi and taking in Samari's spot and moving him over to the left. Because usually the double pivot, for the most part, we've always seen Winks on the left-hand side.
Well, that's not actually true, I would say. I would say most games, actually, it's Samari's opening on the left-hand side because he's helping out Christensen and Mavididi. And that's something that does worry me a little bit because that means down that side, you're going to have Winks, Buonanotte, Justin, Fass. What I'm saying here is these are all the players who I think are defensively positioned bad. So I don't know, maybe they will switch them around for this game, but that's not what we've seen throughout the course of the season. I do think, though, to be fair, right, you know, you're saying Fass instead of Cody. Last time Cody did play against Palace, he looked really, really poor, to be honest with you, although he didn't have get much game time. I don't know. For me, what I'm noticing is that I think that Van Nistelrooy's got a pretty settled 11. As you said, you've put Vestergaard back in the team, which I think makes sense. He did say in the pre-match press conference that he is available, which I think suggests he's going to play. So as you say, that probably means it's the two questions are, is it Fass or is it Cody? And is it Buonanotte or Ayew? I don't know. I actually do see the logic, though, of playing Wout Fass in this particular game, because as you say, that pace could be useful. At the same time, he does have a mistake in him. It's difficult to see. But yeah, I think given the fact that like that player, whoever's playing there's got to watch out for both Mateta and Eza, maybe having a bit of pace is useful. But then if it's someone who makes fast challenges, it could cause. Let's keep an eye on it. I could see the logic either way. But I do find it interesting that Belgian journalist mentioned that Fass is available. That suggests to me that we are trying to get rid of him this window. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't necessarily be against that. Like, he's been okay, but I think the fact is that, well, obviously Danny Ward being in goal was one big reason we went down, but I also think that not successfully replacing Fofana, which to be fair was always going to be a tough ask, was another reason we ended up going down.
Yeah, and I also think sorry, mate, just quickly, I just think there's something to be said for the reason we haven't seen Face and Bofa Coley featured really in Ruud van Nistelrooy's time in charge is I believe personally that if you had to pick two of the centre-backs that get caught out of position too many times, particularly in transition, it's those two. So I think that's the reason why we don't see them feature. I don't know if there's really anything to read into that, but that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, cool. That's definitely true. All right, well, that's it. That is the preview. So let me just ask you while we do that, what do you think the score's going to be? And tell me what your closing thoughts are.
I'm going to go positive, mate. I am going to go 3-1, to be honest with you. I'm just got a confidence and a decent aura this week. I could be, famous last words where I get made to look stupid, but, mate, I'm going to be positive because I think we all need it. And I think that after the game that we just had and, continuing with that belief and confidence to Ruud van Nistelrooy of that result, we know it's QPR, but I don't think the players see it that way. I'm going to go 3-1. My closing thoughts really are we need to retain the ball. Leicester needs to retain the ball in the build-up. In my opinion, we need to be good at possession so that they can't utilize that numerical superiority. So we've got to keep the ball and be effective with our ball distribution. So that's going to really be hinged on Yannick Vestergaard and Bilal El Khanous, as well as teams making and creating that space so they have that option in, the build-up play. Support. Samari, in my opinion, as I mentioned earlier, needs to support Justin or whoever it is in that double pivot option, as well as a centre-back in case of transition. And in my opinion, both Facundo and Bilal need to be utilized similarly as 8s, or you could say 2 10s, in my opinion, because we all know, like I've mentioned several times, that JJ is most likely going to be pushing further at the pitch. I'm not a big fan of it, but if it is going to be used, in my opinion, you're going to have the best because they're going to be attacking, as we mentioned, the box midfield, they can push with 5s and not 4. And if they're going to do that, in my opinion, we're going to match them at their own game. So we're going to have JJ as that option out wide. Bilal and Facundo can be that option in the middle. Facundo is going to be able to have the ball and keep it and drive forward. And then you're going to have Bilal, who's going to be really excellent in his ball distribution. So in my opinion, these two have to start. And I would not prefer to have Ayew at all, mate. What are your thoughts and closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, I prefer having those two as well. I think that third goal we scored against QPR with both Buonanotte and El Khanous combined, it showed you that if we're going to stay up, they're probably the two players that are going to do the most damage. But I do understand sometimes where you want to be defensive, but I think we're at home and we need to win the game, which means we've got to attack. And I just feel that when you have IU, I just don't feel anywhere near as confident of our attacking opportunities as we have Buonanotte. I think Buonanotte's definitely not been as good since Van Nistelrooy came to the club, but I think that's more on Ruud than it is on Facundo because he's changed his position. But we saw a glimpse of what could be there, and yeah, we'll see. So yeah, let's just say that, and then when we see IU lining up, we'll just be like, oh, we got that wrong. Let's see what can happen. But regardless, he can still come off the bench. But yeah, I think that. And I'll give you my prediction. I think I'm going to stay positive as well because I think we have to be. I don't want to think about the negative. I'm going to go for a tightly fought, but I think we'll get the 2-1 win this time round. I'm hoping so anyway.
Awesome. Thank you for watching. Mate,
yeah,
really
thanks so much.
This video.
No worries. Please let us know down below in the comments if you liked our analysis. Please big up Luke if you think he prepared all of this. We've tried to be extra slick. He's obviously auditioning for Match of the Day. I think he might well be getting a good opportunity on it. And what's coming up on the channel? Well, we're going to have this coming out on Tuesday. Tuesday's going to be a big day for Leicester. We may well be getting a points deduction. Well, I don't know if we can find out about that. Well, we'll definitely find if we've been charged by the FA if we've breached PSR. And if that's the case, there might be quite a bit of content on the channel today. If not, though, we'll be available on Wednesday for Matchday Live and the instant match reaction, for which Luke will be joining me out for both. So thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time on Blue Tinted Glasses. Bye-bye.